What is going on, Notre Dame fans? Mike Singer, Tyler Horka, and Jack Soble live on the Blue and Gold YouTube channel talking some Notre Dame football, NFL draft, all that good stuff. Two of the three folks on the screen are not in their normal habitat for these shows. That's okay. We're gonna trek through this, and we're gonna talk some good stuff today. Folks, please hit the thumbs up on this YouTube video. If you're watching on YouTube, listen to it as a podcast. Appreciate you as well. Please leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. And folks on YouTube, please subscribe to the Blue and Gold YouTube channel. Without further ado, let's hop into the topics. We don't need to waste any time. Post-spring depth chart, Tyler and Jack, that's something you guys put out on the website. Tell us, anything surprising on there? Tyler, I'll go to you.
Yeah, I guess I'll handle the defensive side because that's what I put on blueandgold.com. And then I'll let Jack talk about the offense, and then we can kind of mix and match and cover both sides of the ball there. But actually, I was just writing our spring or our junior class review, for our summer edition of the Blue and Gold Illustrated magazine. And I was kind of blown away that when Notre Dame is in a 4-3 base defense, 4 of the 11 guys are actually true juniors. So from that recruiting class of 2023. So you're talking about Drake Bowen, Christian Gray, Adon Schuler. And then now it's looking like Jaden Osbury is going to be the starter at Rover with Jalen Sneed, the senior, obviously kind of switching over to that weak side backer position. So that's kind of what stood out to me, Jack, is that like the turnaround, what Notre Dame has done from a development perspective in terms of turning. And you go back to last year too. These juniors, they were sophomores last year, and those guys were starters last year too in terms of Gray, Schuler, Bowen, and Jaden Osbury actually made a couple of starts. If you go to his Notre Dame football, like his official profile on the school's website, he made a couple of starts as well. So you've got guys who we thought were so young, like a year and a half ago, even this time last year. You're talking about true sophomores. Like I said, you're like, oh my gosh, Notre Dame might be reliant on these guys. Now you feel good about Notre Dame being reliant on those guys. So I love the development piece. Those are Marcus Freeman recruits, right? Those are guys who are in their third year playing football for Notre Dame, and Marcus Freeman's in his fourth year of head coaching. So those are Freeman guys, and I think it's really impressive that those are the guys that you're kind of leaning on. But then you have to talk about some of these transfers too, right, Jack? It's like Jalen Stroman might start, and Devontae Smith's probably going to start at nickel. You're going to see a lot of Jared Dawson in the tackle rotation as well. So to me, Jack, on the defensive side of the ball, I think it's the mixing and matching of like Marcus Freeman Notre Dame guys. And then as we've seen over the last couple of years, you get some transfers to come in and play really good defensive ball for the Fighting Irish as well.
Looking at your depth chart, there's one more junior that I think could easily start, and that's Boubacar Traore at the Viper spot. If I were you, I like a lot of what you did here. If I were you, I would have put an or between Traore and Botello, and then
not a big fan of the or. Hate the or.
I'm a big fan of the or. The ors matter because I think they're going to do it. They're going to do a ton of rotating at those edge rusher spots, and a ton of particularly at the strong side end spot where Burnham's the better run defender and Young is the better pass rusher. I think they do a ton of rotation, and like we could easily, like, Burnham's a good player. We could easily see him starting week 1 and Young gradually as he develops, perhaps passing him later in the season, but maybe not. So looking at your side, I mean, obviously a lot of depth up front. At my side on the offense, there are a couple of positions that stand out as big question marks heading into the fall, in that like the tight end position behind Eli Raridan is a complete blur. I put Kevin Bauman and Jack Larson as a 2 and 3 because we've seen them. We haven't seen James Flanagan and Ty Washington, but you could easily have Flanagan, Washington in some order, being the 2 and the 3, Flanagan, the freshman, and Washington, the Arkansas transfer. Beyond that, like we've talked about this before, the receiver position beyond the top 4 in Fields, Greathouse, Pauling, and Faison is all completely up in the air. Like at field receiver, you could have KK Smith or Elijah Burris. Where does Logan Saldate factor into this if he does? Because I think he had a good spring. Can Micah Gilbert respond from the hand injury that kept him out for all spring ball? Does Cam Williams become a factor? I think he's still a year away, but he definitely made some progress this spring. So I think the starting 11 on offense, besides the quarterback position, is, I think, pretty much set. especially learning what we learned last week about the offensive line. But I'm curious to see where that skill position depth comes from.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'll go back to the junior class review because that took up most of my time today. It's like KK Smith is another guy. You talk about like having to overcome some things at the wide receiver position. I think Cam Williams is in that class of having to overcome just like getting to Notre Dame and maybe not being that guy right away, but accepting that maybe he can be that guy down the line. And then Jaden Greathouse, I think, is a guy as well that like he might explode. Like when I talk about like Jaden Greathouse maybe having a ceiling, because I've talked about that here and in other places, like maybe that's just who he is. I'm starting to fall more into the camp, and you probably are too, Jack, that maybe like a third-year takeoff is actually very possible with him. And then I think that kind of unlocks the rest of the passing offense from a pass-catching perspective, because then that allows guys like KK Smith or Cam Williams or Micah Gilbert, whoever it is, Logan Saldate, to like have a little bit of pressure off of them because they have one of their peers, someone who's around their age, a little older than some of those other guys I mentioned, but actually doing it. And then they're like, okay, maybe I can do it too. So I think the skill position is definitely intriguing. I'm still not, I think the offensive line still might have some like weird quirks and whatever down the line, because I can't get it out of my head that Anthony Knapp and Sam Pendleton, we would never even have mentioned their names on a Notre Dame six-pack show if it would have existed at this time last year. But by August, they're the two guys. So I don't know who that would be this year. Sullivan Apsher, maybe. Will Black, Gerby Lambert. Some of those tackles are intriguing, but I'm not. The offensive line still might have some tricks up the sleeve.
I don't know if you can really make that comparison. Like I get what you're saying, but like there's a lot more confidence in the building at those spots than there was last, and also because like Knapp started because of an injury last year.
Can I just get like a quick yes or no? What about Vitello and Boubacar being, I mean, one's Viper, one's the other DN spot. Like, why can't we just see that? Yes or no? You guys like that?
I mean, I think Burnham and Young are pretty good, and they're both better fits for Viper than strong side end.
Yeah, and Vitello was like finally comfortable at Viper, because that was the thing with him before too, was, hey, do we move him to the strong side? Like, no, he's a Viper, so they can share time there, I think.
I think they both play a ton.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I think for this season, I think that's your two best defensive ends. So, and
it's crazy because Junior Tui Halamaka helped this team get to the national championship game last year, and he's 3 now. I had him 3, and I think that's where he is.
Yeah, I think Bryce.
In the base package, you don't see Vitello and Boubacar on the field at the same time. I think on the third down package, you absolutely, and we saw that before Vitello got hurt, like against A&M last season. You'll see him on the field at the same time on third downs.
Okay, so the transfer portal closed on Friday, but then you could still submit it, whatever. But as of now, Wednesday at 5:09 p.m. Eastern time, guys, we think that it's officially closed. You're not going to see any Notre Dame guys enter. Are you surprised? We only saw, what was it, just in terms of scholarship guys, Jack, it was only Urlacher and Steve in the spring portal window. Are you surprised we didn't see anyone else?
Very much so, particularly at some position groups. Like, I am shocked that they didn't have a single running back leave. Like, you have a guy in Jabron Payne who is probably running back 5 right now. That's where he was lining up in the spring behind Kedron Young, and could be at least a solid number 2, getting 20 or more snaps a game at a lot of really good programs. And I think at some Power 4 programs he could even start. So it's not just him. Like, I'm surprised that entire room stuck together. I'm surprised there wasn't a single linebacker who left. That's a pretty crowded room. And just beyond like position groups, like there are some guys where I'm obviously not going to name names, but I'm looking at their place in the depth chart, and what year they are in school, and I'm thinking like, you don't really have a future at Notre Dame, but guys are staying because I think the culture. There are 3 reasons. Number 1, the culture that Freeman's created is really, really strong. Number 2, their NIL program and the way they use a really big chunk of that towards retention, I think is huge. I think if you think Kennedy Urlacher was the only player that Chad Bowden tried to get to USC, I have a bridge to sell you. So I think their NIL program is really strong in terms of retention. And 3, I think it's the value of Notre Dame degree. that I think is why a lot of these back of the roster players are sticking around.
Yeah, if you think that Kennedy Urlacher is the only Notre Dame guy that Chad Bowden tried to get to go to USC, I'll open up these windows right here, and you'll see exactly behind me what you're seeing in Mike Singer's shot there. And let me tell you right now, that is not the case. Two reasons that the numbers are shocking to me, Jack, is because let's include the winter portal window in this, and then you come to the one that we just hopefully officially closed yesterday or Monday, whatever it was. You could count on both hands how many scholarship guys left Notre Dame from both of those windows, right? Was it half a dozen in the winter? I think it was 6.
I think it was 6 in the winter. It would have been the 4 offensive linemen. There are a couple more that I'm forgetting.
It was. I know the number was 6. I can't remember who those other 2 guys are either.
While you keep talking, I'll look this up.
We're gonna get dinged from Mark with glasses for that, but yeah, it's 8 scholarship guys that you left or that you lost in the last 2 portal cycles. So that's mind-boggling because some of these programs are losing what seemed like 8 a day, and Notre Dame was not one of those programs. Obviously, there's more volatility with like the SEC and the Big Ten programs because you can accept. Jack, who was it?
We're forgetting Thomas and Colsey. So it was the 4 offensive linemen,
wide receivers.
It was the 4 offensive linemen and the 2 wide receivers. That's it.
So that's, like you said, Jack. There's linebackers who could have left. I think there's more offensive linemen who could have left. When you were talking about the whole probably don't have a future at Notre Dame spiel, like I think there's still offensive linemen on this team that probably fall into that just because how well Notre Dame has recruited the top end. I mean, the 2 deep, I don't know if the full 2 deep is as good as it gets in America, but those 5 starters that Marcus Freeman was talking about last week, and then a couple of the backups who aren't going to be able to play. And then beyond that is where you're like, okay, how did that guy not enter the portal? The other thing that makes this interesting to me is like, is this Notre Dame completely banking on a scholarship roster increase? Because it hasn't happened yet. The house settlement is not a thing. And if 85 is still a thing, if that's still your limit, which it's been for so long, Notre Dame is way over that right now. I think we have Notre Dame at 93 scholarship players.
I believe. 93 per year.
Like at this time, and I'll shout out another one of our valued members at blueandgold.com. Arrow fan is like the scholarship roster limit guy, right? Like
a lot of scholarship hawks on that board.
Yeah, he's one of them, amongst other things. We love Arrow. But like at this time in April and May and June, he'd be like, okay, how are we getting down to 85? How are we getting down to 85? Usually it's coming from like 89 down to 85. You're talking 93 down to 85 is a big deal. So I'm guessing Notre Dame is banking on that 105 number, because if it's not, well, you had a quiet winter portal, you had a quiet spring portal, you're going to have a noisy summer if you need to get down to 85, because there's a lot of trimming to be done if that's the case. And if it's not the case, then, well, you're way under 105, and maybe you even get some walk-ons that are going to be cut at other programs. So Notre Dame's in an interesting spot there, but for like what this was, what the spring window was, absolutely surprising you didn't lose more guys.
Shocking that no running backs entered the portal from this group. Yeah, I think there might have been something with like grass not being greener on the other side, and Notre Dame players, look, they make a lot of money, but still, that I thought that was fascinating. I was expecting like 3 more guys to hit the portal, but whether it's a combination of someone we don't expect and someone we do expect, but it was 0. Andy Staples put out a way too early top 25 after spring ball. Who was number 1 on that one? I think it was Texas, and then Notre Dame. I wasn't trying to do a Texas thing, Tyler, I promise.
Okay, I thought you were.
No, I really wasn't. I was just thinking out loud. So Texas was number 1. How about Notre Dame at number 2? I think Ohio State was down to like 4. I'll have the correct staff look that up in just a second. But I thought that was interesting.
Ohio State's at 5.
Tyler, what did you think about that? Do you think Notre Dame should be 2 at this point?
I think it's always way too early to tell on these types of things. But here's like when the first way too early top 25s came out, everyone was loving on Texas. So I'll start with the number 1 on Andy Staples' list. And I thought about everything that Texas lost. Like 12 players just got drafted from Texas in the NFL draft. It's a program record. It's a sign of program health when you have that many drafted, but it's also like you have to replace those guys. And yeah, Texas has been good for a couple seasons, but it's not like they're at the Alabama level where they're going to replace them. Georgia has gotten to that point where you lose all these former 5-stars to the NFL draft. You got a bunch of them that are going to play really well again. I don't know if Texas is there, and you have a unproven quarterback. So that's where Notre Dame kind of comes into this too, because Notre Dame is also going to have an unproven quarterback. So that's the thing that stands out to me when you look at the very top of Andy Staples' list is, okay, yeah, it's Arch Manning. He's got the last name, but what has he done in games? We haven't seen a whole lot of them. We have not seen any of Kenny Minchey or CJ Carr in games like this either. So it's interesting. It's probably going to look a lot different in September, October, November, December, but I do think that Notre Dame has some staying power, and Texas probably has some staying power. Where are those going to be the two top teams on Andy Staples' list in mid-October? Probably not. Stuff happens. Teams lose games. It is what it is. Are those two top 10 teams, like at this point, perennially? I think so. I think, Jack, you're talking about Notre Dame and Texas at this point, like you talk about those other teams that I just mentioned, where they're probably going to stay in the top 5 to 10 all the time, every single year. I think they're really in healthy spots.
I think Notre Dame and Texas at 1 and 2 is really indicative, or at 2 and 1 respectively, is really indicative of how wide open this year is in college football, because there's really not that super team. I was looking down Andy's list and like I could see anyone from like 1 through 8. So it goes Texas, Notre Dame, Clemson, Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, Alabama, Georgia. And anyone on that list I feel like has the ability and talent to win it all, and B, a ton of question marks. Texas at the top, like you said, they lost a bunch. They have a lot to fill on their offensive lines. I think Sark's Texas has been good enough on the line of scrimmage on both sides since he really got the program established that you give them the benefit of the doubt there, and they have 2 of the best front 7 players in Colin Simmons and Anthony Hill, but they have a lot to replace. You go to Notre Dame, Staples did a great job of pointing out like 2 offensive linemen who started the Natty are entering the portal because they probably wouldn't have started, or at least wouldn't have been guaranteed the starter. He did predict CJ Carr winning the quarterback job, which I don't think we're ready to do quite yet. But he made the great point that like a great offensive line is the most recession-proof factor in football. Staples said, and I think that's a big reason to be certainly optimistic about Notre Dame's floor this year, as well as the ceiling. Then you go down the list, and I know it's natural to be skeptical about Penn State, but if you're looking for someone similar to Ohio State last year, Penn State doesn't have the top-end talent, but Ohio State was great last year in large part because it convinced all these juniors who had NFL opportunities to stay for their senior year, and Penn State did that with pretty much everyone but Abdul Carter, who was able to leave but didn't have to. Then Ohio State's has a ton to replace, but also the best defensive player and best offensive player in college football in Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Smith. So it's so many teams with a lot, but also a lot of question marks. And I like Andy putting Notre Dame up there because, again, the offensive line is going to be really good. The defense brought a ton back. The quarterback is a question mark. We don't know, but we also don't know with so many of these teams. Like it's going to be a really fun year in college football because if anyone tells you they know who's the title favorite right now, they're lying to you.
It seems like back-to-back years of that too. I don't know if we knew that going in last year. I think I actually picked Ohio State to win the national championship. It ended up happening. But like as that year went on and you saw that Ohio State was at least a little bit fallible and beatable, Oregon did it. And then obviously Michigan did it. So like they could be had. I think you're going to have the same type of approach to the season from the very beginning this year that you had last year, because Texas goes to Ohio State. Ohio State's number 5 on Andy's list. Like they could easily lose that game. Notre Dame starts out with 2 very tough games. So like, again, this is probably not going to be the way the rankings look at the beginning of the year. Andy might even change his rankings by that time. But like if Notre Dame and Texas are the 2 top teams in the country, and they look extremely beatable or maybe even lose early on, Jack, I think that's going to reinforce your point even more, where people are going to be approaching this season like, holy cow, who the heck is the best team in America? Who's going to win the national championship? And the reality is you could probably say 3 to 5 to like 7 teams may be able to win it. And that's never the case in college football. And I think it makes it all the more exciting.
Jack, you wrote an article the other day headlined, "What is the biggest question Notre Dame must answer between now and week 1?" Tyler, I believe you did something with that in an article recently as well that was asked to you. I mean, it's got to be the quarterback. That's kind of the obvious thing between CJ Carr and Kenny Minchie. But, Jack, what else did you guys talk about in that article?
The quarterback is the obvious thing. Todd Burlage made the point, we just talked about how the offensive line is a strength, but the 5 didn't really play together in spring ball. And it's a position where continuity is so important. So I'm not sure if I agree with Todd's point, but I definitely understand it. You can check that out at blueandgold.com. I went with leadership, and the reason being that I think in a year where you can lose and still win the national, you can lose in the regular season and still win the national championship. It's so important to respond from that first loss, because you're probably going to have that first, like Tyler, you made the point that Ohio State, Notre Dame, Texas all have really tough games early in the season. Like, you can afford to lose one of those games and still accomplish every one of your goals, which we saw with Notre Dame last year. We saw with Ohio State. So the separator is going to be who has the wherewithal to withstand a loss and improve and not fall apart. And Notre Dame had that last year with its veteran leadership, guys like Riley Leonard and Riley Mills, Ben Morrison, the captain. I'm just listing off the captains: Jack Kaiser, Xavier Watts, but there are so many others. The leadership leans a lot younger this year, to the point where, like, I'm pretty confident Drake Bowen's going to be a captain. Beyond that, I really don't know. But even Bowen is a really young guy for a shoe-in captain, as we're talking about him. So leadership is an important question. And obviously, the storylines about that in like fall camp, they always get tired, but they really matter. And I think we saw that a lot in college football last year.
I just keep bringing up this junior class review that I kept working on, but you're prompting this today. Drake Bowen, I think, is a legit captain candidate. Other side of the ball, I think Jaden Greathouse has come into his own, and people view him as a leader. Those guys are both true juniors. I think Jaden Greathouse, he could be wide receiver 1. Malachi Fields might have something to say about that, but what Greathouse has over Fields is having been in this program for over 2 years now, and like I think that's legit in terms of leadership. So yeah, I like that. Like, who are the leaders? You can kind of point at them, but when you do point at them, you're like, holy cow, he's only a junior. So that's really interesting. I think a big question that Notre Dame has to answer is, it goes a little bit beyond the quarterbacks, but obviously the quarterbacks are a huge part of it. Is this passing offense actually going to be legit? Like can Notre Dame go into a football game and say, yeah, we can win because we're throwing the ball really well? I don't know if it's going to need to do that, because I still think the offensive line, Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, we talked about the running backs earlier in this show. There's plenty of them, and they can all run really, really well. But whoever's going to be the quarterback, you're not going to see the quarterback run game like you saw it with Riley Leonard. I mean, that was one of a kind. And it got to a point where it was so special because Notre Dame was able to lean on it so much. Not going to be there this year. I think a lot of that is going to be filtered into the passing game. Yeah, you can say, okay, just run Love more, but we know Marcus Freeman's stance on that, right? It's like, save the tread on that guy's tires. Like, he's going to be better for not touching the ball as much as an Ashton Genty or, a volume-based runner like that. So I think that the passing game is going to have to be a lot better for Notre Dame to get to where it wants to be. And that's the question. Like, I don't know if I have the answer right now. And I'll use this as an example, Jack. I went into the national championship game last year thinking, I actually picked Notre Dame to win it. I was wrong. But if Ohio State was going to win it, it's because they're going to make plays in the passing game that Notre Dame does not make. And shout out Jaden Greathouse for having the game that he did, because he kept it close in that regard. But when it came down time to win a national championship, Will Howard, Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Buka was great in that game. I think Carnell Tate even made a couple of catches. Like, Notre Dame needs to have a semblance of that in its game. Because I think of national champions in this era, and I get it, running is kind of coming back. There was a wave there where it's like, if you're not throwing the ball, you're not winning. I don't think that's necessarily the case anymore, but it's still vitally important. And I think of all the great quarterbacks who have won national championships for their programs over the years at Alabama, at Clemson, at Georgia, you know the names. Will Howard played phenomenal football throwing the ball last year in the college football playoff. Can Notre Dame do that? Is CJ Carr going to do that? Is Kenny Minchie going to do that? That's a huge question mark for me. If it happens, Notre Dame can absolutely get back to the CFP and make noise in it again.
I think in Greathouse and Fields, you have two guys of your Notre Dame who I'm not saying they're going to be wide receiver ones. Like, I'm not ready to say that yet. I think they're more capable of being a true number one. Year 3 Greathouse and the Virginia transfer Fields. I think they're more capable of being wide receiver ones than anyone Notre Dame has had since Chase Claypool in like 2020, whenever he came out. Like, everything we hear about Greathouse has been really good this spring, and I think they're going to move him around more than they have before. Denbrock's mentioned him as someone who could do this in the past, but I think they're going to move him inside and outside more than they have before. And Fields is just that big-bodied boundary target Notre Dame has really not had in a while. So I think they have the horses to throw the ball better than they have in the past. It just all depends on if the quarterbacks are ready.
Jack, I want to spend 6 minutes talking the 2025 NFL draft. Well, and then we're going to go to 26 after this, but especially the 3 big ones in terms of Xavier Watts, Ben Morrison, and Riley Leonard. So we talk about the other guys, but those are the 3 I really want to land on. Surprises where those 3 went. Do you like the fit for any of them in particular? Jack, I know you're a big draft guy. So, I mean, if you would have told me going into the day that Riley Leonard and Shedeur Sanders would be 1 round apart, I would have thought that would have been fascinating, and I wouldn't believe you. But, yeah, just thoughts on some of these things, Jack, and I'll throw it to Ty.
Watts fell farther than I thought he would. I don't know how much farther. I would have spent an early second on Watts. I know he was more projected as a mid-second, but Watts is a guy who I really think the NFL just overthought. I think you have NFL teams who are obsessed with size and speed, and they miss the rare instincts that Xavier Watts brings. I think a Falcon scout describing him, he obviously went number 96 to the Falcons. They actually traded up for him, which I had missed at the time. He talking about, like, he's got as much intelligence and instincts as you're ever going to see at the safety position, and that's a position where instincts can really make up for a lack of track speed. And I think that's something a lot of NFL teams missed. Morrison and Leonard, I think, went about where I would have taken him and where they were projected to go. But Watts, I really think the league made a mistake on.
I'll start with Leonard and then kind of work back to those other 2 guys who went on day 2. I thought it was fascinating that, and it's another thing that I learned in kind of listening to these guys, the front office for the Indianapolis Colts talk and listening to Riley Leonard talk. It sounds like there's a serious relationship established between Riley Leonard and Shane Steichen, which is interesting. Jack, you made sure to note when he got picked that you texted me that Steichen was only one of 2 NFL head coaches at Notre Dame's pro day, right? Mike Tomlin of the Steelers being the other. So I get it. He didn't have far to go, but in kind of like retroactively thinking about it, I think he was there to see Riley Leonard, and probably there was nothing Leonard could do that day, and unless he just had a terrible, terrible day, which he did not. He had a pretty good day. The Colts were like, yeah, if we can get this guy 5, 6, 7, we're probably going to get him. And that's what they did. And it's kind of cool to see Riley Leonard wearing like everyone wears the cap on draft day, right? And they're sitting in their living rooms, but he had a shirt on and everything. And a reporter was like, it seemed like you were ready to be taken by the Colts. And he was like, yeah, I would love to go back to Indiana. So that's where he's going. The emotion from Ben Morrison on draft night was incredible. You think about all that he went through, like Notre Dame just had its best season in decades, really, or at least a decade and a half. If you go back to the runner-up finish in 2012 against Alabama that year, like Morrison was always supposed to be a part of that, right, Jack? Like he's the guy. We went into at this time last spring, you're thinking that's the best football player on this team. right? And then he only gets to play 5, 6, 7 games, whatever it was, out for the year, hip injury. He's got to watch his guys go all the way to the national championship. He was supposed to be a part of that. And now he gets to wipe the slate clean and go to a place that I think is like a perfect spot for him. And I think they're going to use him early, and they think that he is like what we all thought he was when he was at Notre Dame, which was like one of the, if not the best corners in college football. So I thought that was really cool as well. And then I don't know if we want to talk about the other 3 guys. Might as well give them a little bit of love. Jack, if you want to take that away.
So Mills, Evans was picked about where I thought he would. I think playing next to Tommy Tremble is obviously nice if you're a Notre Dame fan. Mills probably went about where I would have thought he would. It was notable, like you found out, Tyler, that the Seahawks brought him in for a 30 visit and cleared the knee. The Kaiser story, I was reading up on this for the magazine item on the draft. So Kaiser was at the Senior Bowl, and James Gladstone, who's now the Jaguars GM, was at the time the Rams director of scouting, and he went into his interview with the Jaguars like 3 weeks later, and had a list of guys like he really wanted to target in day 3, and Kaiser was on that in large part because of what he saw at the Senior Bowl. If you're a Notre Dame fan, you might like kind of brush off the nugget that Kaiser was playing safety at the Senior Bowl. Kind of they were short on numbers for whatever reason, so he moonlighted at safety. Gladstone, the Jaguars GM, like really noticed that and was like, this is a guy who's not worried about what he's about how he's gonna be perceived. He's probably gonna play worse than he is at safety, playing out of position. But this is a guy who's not gonna care about that, and who just loves ball, and who really wants to get after it. And that's something that really impressed the Jaguars. And the Senior Bowl really matters for these guys putting themselves on the map, particularly a mid-round prospect like Kaiser. And he went, I think, higher than a lot of us thought he would. I thought I had a suspicion he would be the first Notre Dame player drafted on day 3. He went really, really early on day 3. I think just 11 picks after Watts. And he's in a crowded linebacker room in Jacksonville, but it's a new regime, and I think Kaiser was someone they really targeted early on day 3.
Never too early, guys, to talk about class of 2026, man. Thinking recruiting, the 2026 NFL drafts, and saw some early mocks. Jeremiah Love being RB1, Charles Jagusaw being picked in the first round as well. Tyler, let's talk about those 2 guys and anyone else who you feel like should be mentioned as potential first, second day guys. Maybe throw in the Virginia transfer Malachi Fields.
Yeah, I think most of this time should probably be spent on Love, because I think it's really intriguing that Notre Dame might have a first round running back come out. And Jack, I don't know if you've crunched numbers on the last time that's happened, but like Notre Dame's had some good running backs that they put in the league. Kyron Williams being the most recent of those. Audric Estime as well. We'll see if he can get off to I think it was the second year where Kyron Williams really broke out, started scoring a bunch of touchdowns. And obviously he kept on doing that last year in year 3 as well. But like even Kyron Williams was a 4th, 5th, 6th round. Like he was a day 3 guy. You're talking about 5th round.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you're talking about Jeremiah Love being like a top 15 to 20 pick overall. That's different at Notre Dame. So I think it's like, if he has the season that he's going to have, and this is why you should not take it for granted, guys, as well, because I just spent a bunch of time talking about Benjamin Morrison in the last segment. 18 months ago, I was sure as anything can be that Benjamin Morrison would be a future first round pick. Like he did enough as a true freshman where I'm like, heck, he could have as many interceptions in his next 2 seasons as he had in that first season, because they're going to stop throwing at him and all that. And he's going to be in the first round. You have the hip injury and maybe even some games in there that he'd probably tell you, like, I could have been better. I wasn't at my full Benjamin Morrison capabilities and ability. All of a sudden, you're talking about a guy that slides to number 53 overall, right? So I'm not saying that's going to happen to Jeremiah Love, but Jack, when you put out that early mock and I saw like all of the first round predictions on him, and I think you even did something the day before that where you kind of keyed in on someone said that he was going to go like 16th overall, right? Like that is no small thing for any running back out of any program, but we're talking about Notre Dame here. So that's huge. But then when you're talking about maybe a guy who's going to have like the best NFL career because there's less pressure, like Jeremiah Love's going to have some pressure of producing in a small window because running backs don't last forever anymore. And, you got a small window to do what you do, and he's going to have to do that. Charles Jagasaw, if he stays healthy, he can last in the league for like 10 to 15 years. And I think a lot of people are expecting that. So I think he probably has, of this next draft class, the best NFL career of anyone that we're talking about in this segment. But again, for me, Jack, like the possibility of Notre Dame having a first-round running back is so intriguing and awesome. And I hope Jeremiah Love stays healthy, and I hope he looks exactly like he did last year or maybe even a little bit better, because he will be a first-round pick, and somebody's going to be really excited to get him this time next year.
Yeah, I think after Morrison, we always have to add the barring injury qualifier, because Morrison would have been a first-rounder if he didn't get hurt. Barring injury, Jeremiah Love's a first-round running back. He's the best running back in the country. He's the best running back in the draft class. There was one mock that I found that didn't have him in the first. It had C.J. Baxter out of Texas. The rest had Love in like the 14 to 28 range. Our guest from last week, Jacob Infante, and I are starting the campaign to get him in Chicago over there. Wrong hand.
I saw a lot of Chicago on your little thing, right?
There's a lot of Chicago, a lot of Dallas, a lot of Houston. If I'm a team with a solid infrastructure and a good offensive line, and I want to take my offense from good to great, I think that is the lesson that you learn from guys like Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry. And there's one more, Christian McCaffrey, who were wasting away on mediocre to bad teams, really not really making an impact. Then they go in front and behind a really offensive line. They take those teams from good to great. That's what Jeremiah Love can do for a team. That's what a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs did for Detroit. Three other guys who I saw in way too early first-round mocks, and we have to take this with a grain of salt because Howard Cross was appearing in way too early first-round mocks at this time last year. He obviously did not get drafted. I think he's in a really good situation with Al Golden in Cincinnati. But Charles Jagasaw, Malachi Fields, and Jaden Greathouse was in a couple. And I don't know about Fields. I don't know. He's got the production, but he's an older prospect and maybe has the speed. Jagasaw, if he came out after this year, would be a one-year wonder, but man, he's got first-round upside for sure at guard, maybe even at tackle. He's got the size for that, but Notre Dame's going to play him at guard. He has first-round upside for sure. I just don't know if it'll be after this year. Greathouse, the first-round hype might be an overreaction to the CFP, but I think he absolutely has day two talent. Can he run fast enough to be a first-rounder? That's still up for debate. You got like a similar archetype in Emeka Egbuka, who went in the first rounder this season. Egbuka is he's a 4.48 guy. I don't know if Greathouse is a 4.48 guy, but I think he's got NFL skill set for sure, particularly if he can move around. I have a few more guys on my list of guys who I think are really good NFL draft prospects out of Notre Dame. Christian Gray, Drake Bowen, Emil Wagner, Adon Schuler, Billy Schrauth, Boubacar Traore. I list those off pretty fast because we're running out of time here. I don't know if all of those are first-round guys, but those are the main guys I'm looking at who have NFL traits and could go in 2026.
Just want to spend a second talking about Howard Cross there, because I forgot. Yeah, he was being mocked there this time last year, and he had a good season. Well, why, Jack? I mean, is it just like why would he have been mocked first round last year and now not even drafted this year?
So when you're a defensive lineman who doesn't fit the prototypical size mold, Cross is 6'1", particularly as a nose tackle like he plays. I mean, he's a slasher. He shoots gaps, which is why he's a really good fit for that Al Golden one gap scheme. When you're his size, you have to be like ridiculously dominant to get NFL looks. And he was in 2023. He wasn't that. He was good in 2024. He was really good, but he wasn't as dominant. And obviously, the nagging injuries, as a comment is showing, contributed to that. He wasn't as explosive, particularly down the stretch. So I think that contributed to that. But I think he has a good chance to stick around with Cincinnati.
Okay, good stuff, Jack. Folks, please hit the thumbs up on this video if you have not done so yet. Subscribe to the Blue and Gold YouTube channel for more content. If you're just tuning in here, rewind, watch from the beginning of the show. Some great stuff from Jack Soble and Tyler Horka. Next show will be Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Myself and Kyle Kelly will talk some Notre Dame recruiting during the very busy week with the coaches out on the road and commitments potentially around the corner for the Fighting Irish. So lock in Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Again, appreciate you all for watching this or listening to this as a podcast. And as always, we will catch you next time.